Today we're going to talk about fault. And this is going to be specifically about a technique, a mindset, a strategy, and a tool that you can utilize to get the most out of your life. Now, this video isn't going to be about the objective reality of whether it is your fault or not. I'm not going to be the judge of that, even when clearly what's happening isn't your fault. What I'm proposing is that from the perspective of moving forward effectively and efficiently, it doesn't matter whose fault it is. What matters the most is how you deal with it. And in my experience, most people, me including, get stuck on the morals or the ethics of it. I'm not saying those aren't important, but from a practical perspective, they don't usually give you any additional leverage in terms of changing the outcome. A lot of people get stuck on crying about why things happened and pointing fingers and saying, well, if this had happened differently, I wouldn't be in this place in the first place. And those things might be true. So anything you can learn and apply and integrate as a tool to counter that, the better your position in life is going to be. And in my experience, this technique is also gonna reveal and uncover a lot of the things that you might be blaming on other people, when in truth, you yourself are really the bottleneck when it comes to this issue. So when I've been applying this, I've had my prejudiced thoughts, I've had my ideas of how it went down and why things happened and whose fault it is, and I was blaming someone else instead of taking ownership and taking responsibility, and through that actually changing my position, and afterwards realizing that this was actually more of my fault than theirs. And I don't think I would have realized those things unless I had taken this sort of an extreme ownership, extreme responsibility stance. So essentially there are two parts to this strategy, to this technique. So part one is simulating or entertaining a scenario where you ask yourself, if this was my fault, what did I do to facilitate this situation? And the power of this step is to reveal or uncover the steps surrounding the actual damaging step itself. So let's say someone screwed you over, either through a deal or the lack of a deal, and therefore something was taken away from you, either money or an opportunity, whatever it may be. And of course, that was the most defining moment when a person chooses to do harm to another. You can't take away from that. I'm not trying to reduce the impact or the importance or the malicious intent of that step, but my attempt is to reveal that these things don't happen in isolation. And the reason I suggest that people do this first step is so that you can realize the chain of events, the series of smaller, minor steps that allow that final step to manifest. So we let small things slip here and there all the time. We don't stand up against minor wrongdoings, which always gives more ground to the thing that ultimately can take advantage of you. When we allow those smaller wrongdoings to gain more and more ground, that's when we start to lose the fight. Essentially, this is like a reality check on steroids. Now, people don't like to look into the past, especially if they need to look for fault in themselves. And although the wrongdoing in the form of the final step, when someone screws you over, although that is not your fault, the lack of alertness, the lack of paying attention, the lack of standing up against smaller wrongdoings, that's what facilitated the manifestation of the final step. And ultimately, this could mean anything. It could mean minor slips in your character, it could be minor things you did or didn't do, which often is equally bad, if not often worse than doing something. So try and ask yourself the question of, did I say something, did I do something, or did I not do something that made this possible? And be very rigorous in your assessment. Try and look through your actions with a magnifying glass, and it's really gonna show you there are steps all around us that facilitate a lot of the bad shit that happens to us. There's always an upkeep cost to the good things that we have going on for ourselves. So please look through your actions, your inactions, and your words with a very fine-tooth comb. And if you do this truthfully and honestly, you're gonna find that there are a ton of things around you all the time that facilitate the pathology that manifests around you. Which brings us to the second step, which is, of course, if this were my fault, what could I have done to stop it from happening? So now you take the simulation even further, and by thinking about what you could have done, you start to reveal this potential meta-reality that always exists around us. A potential is great and all, but it doesn't have any worth unless you actually manifest that potential into actuality. And I know that people naturally don't want to go there because in most cases they are trapped in their negative emotion. You can't take a step back to look at the big picture, to take in all the variables that are at play, and then ask themselves the question of, do I actually want to solve this? Would it be better if I did something about this? Would it be better if I tried to be the bigger person in this situation? And I've talked about the ego before, and it's usually the negative products of the ego that prevent people from going to that place to really do some serious internal reflection and ask themselves, is it really better that I stay bitter and resentful and do nothing about it because something was the fault of someone else? Or can I look at what I did poorly or what I perhaps fucked up? And could I have done something differently, or can I do something differently right now? It's a very harsh mirror. It's going to reveal all of the pathologies and all of the shortcomings that you have as an individual. And that's not comfortable. It's not something people normally want to do. In most cases, we have an unnecessarily charged emotional response to the matter. And the problem with that is that it makes it very difficult to figure out an effective and appropriate solution to whatever situation we're facing. No matter whose fault it is, it's still not gonna take away the fact that something needs to be done about it, and that you need to respond in such a way that you don't get stuck in your life. And if you do this, you're always going to maximize the potential positive outcome that any situation can give you. And if you're willing to do that, the amount of ownership and responsibility that you're going to bring into your life, it can't help but change your life forever.